a ton of women around my neighborhood were getting induced. At one point, I think it was 5 out of 7 births were induced. And it just seemed like, I'm like, are there a lot of golf vacations this time of year? I mean, what's going on with the induction? And nobody seemed to know. Like, they just said, okay, induction is totally fine. I'm like, wait, that seems like an unnatural thing. Like, I don't think other species induce. I mean, I could be wrong. I just watch City Slickers. They induced a cow, but whatever. So I said, let's study induction. So I went online, did a little Googling, and what I was able to come up with the most was this definition, okay? That's what I got. We induce labor if you go your due date plus 2 weeks or more. And actually, you can't go more, because if you've gone 2 weeks past your due date, they induce. So technically speaking, you can't go 3 weeks over your due date, or they just pull the baby at 2. But that doesn't mean that the baby doesn't want to stay in there more than 2 weeks. Remember, this curve shows you the theoretical, right? The theoretical due dates. There's a baby somewhere in that period that wants to stay in there for 370 days. I mean, it's a very rare occurrence. But that baby will not have that chance because they'll pull it at 14 days past the due date, even though it's programmed to stay in there that long. Fair enough? Okay. Where's that live? Where's that live? Let's go over here. 2 weeks. Go back to Omar's weeks. 2 weeks past, right? So 14 days. Okay, so here we go. Where is it?
266 plus 14.
Okay, 266 plus 14, yes? We're going on an average. The average due date is 266. I know there's variation. One of the biggest criticisms I always hear about this is because the due date is done by the thought of when the conception happened. I understand there's variability, but assuming we can trust the 266, 14 days up is pretty easy to do, yes? It's 280, which puts us right about here. So in other words, any pregnancy right there, which is 280, are these going to be induced? 266 going to be induced? 267, 268, 269, 281? 282? 281 and a half? 298? 300? Jesus, yeah. So who's going to be induced? All of those are going to be induced. All of those are going to be induced, yes? All of those are going to be induced. Say that again.
No.
Well, no.
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 And in fact, I don't want to get into it, but as usual,
I'm going to get into it, brother.
inducing would be using a chemical inducer where it's naturally induced by stress.
Pitocin?
Pitocin, we're stressing out the mother that is expected by making her do strenuous exercise for the day.
Oh. If you got too big, I would want to see that.
My son went past 2 weeks.
Let's stay friends.
Yeah.
After you have a C-section, but it's still.
Sure. I'm just saying the C-section is not the go-to thing after we get past the 2 week point.
I trust him, and I trust him.
Oh, I agree. My son came out huge. I mean, he went over 2 weeks, and we did not induce.
It's all good. As long as you're not fighting each other. Sure. It's a nice discourse. I like it. It's very nice.
I agree with you.
I like it a whole lot.
Well, not easier, just a half.
So it's a flag, in other words. Now, all we're throwing is a flag that says, hey, boom, let's talk now.
And it's all based off of theoretical duty.
Of course. A midwife, years ago, I used the same example in class years ago, she got so pissed at me.
Right.
Like, that is wrong. I'm like, okay, what should we use instead? And I want to come back to that. I want to come back to that, what should we use instead, because that is important in this calculation. Because if these numbers are off, not the 2 weeks, but if the standard deviation is off in particular, is anybody else concerned the standard deviation is over 2 weeks? That is a hell of a range of dates. Look, that's a month plus. That's 32 days right there, yeah? That's a hell of a lot of time. And her concern was, that's way too wide. I'm like, okay, then flog the researchers that told me to use it. Don't flog the messenger. Sorry. But so that is a problem. I mean, maybe this should be more tight. Let's talk about that momentarily, okay? Let's come back to that point. Let's answer this question. That looks like a lot of area to me, yes? That does. So the question is, how much area? What does that look like? Well, clearly, it's more than 16%. Because if it landed at 282, it would be 16%, correct? But we picked up a little bit more here. So how much is it? Is it 25? I don't think it's 25. What do we have to know? Well, first of all, timeout. Is this forwards or backwards? It's forwards, isn't it? because you don't have a percentage right now. I'm actually asking you what the percentage is. So think about what we had to do last time. We went from area to Z to raw. Now we're going to go raw to Z to area. It's exactly backwards. So the first thing you have to do is convert 280 so it's on this scale down here. And I think this is the easiest tool to do it, yeah? Take the 280, subtract the average, divide by the standard deviation. That tells you how many standard deviations it is. It's not many. You got 280 minus the average of 266 all over that 16, which ends up being 14/16, which is 7/8. It's not even a full standard deviation above average. That should happen quite a bit, yes? Within a standard deviation, you already know that 68% of the data is within a standard deviation, so you've got a chunk of likelihood for it being in there. So now we got to take that number, that's the normal standard deviation, and figure out how much area is above 7/8. This is where technology comes in, yes? Because now we know the standard deviation, shift it out above. Let's go over here. Yes. And you can see how important it is. This is what the midwife was wanting to kill me about.